Hey, yeah, I'm Chris Ralph, the professional prospector, and I'm out here today prospecting, looking for gold in an old pocket mining area in the mother lode country of California. And I'm here with my brother Danny. Hey, Danny. And my brother-in-law John. Hi. And we're just kind of exploring around. I've been in this area before, but it's been a lot of years. And so I'm just kind of coming back and exploring it, looking to maybe use our metal detectors and see if we can find some gold. And I found this little thing. You know, you could see if you look here, there's a trench that's been dug right here. It's just a short trench, about 25 feet long maybe. And this is the kind of thing, when you see signs like this, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about signs that the old timers were working here and what to look for if you find those signs. So this little trench is the kind of thing that the miners would dig looking for a vein. So, you know, here you can see everything's covered with pine needles and dead branches and old leaves and that kind of stuff. So it's hard to find something. And so if the old timers would find like a piece of quartz or several pieces of quartz, you wouldn't know where the vein was. And so they would dig a trench like this, and you know, they would see if they could find where the quartz vein was in the ground, because a lot of times on the surface you may just find a few loose pieces of quartz, whereas, you know, you're looking for the vein in place in the red rock of the ground. And so they would cut like this looking for a quartz vein. Now if you're out in an area like this and you have a metal detector, it's worthwhile going around these things to see. And especially if you can find, like off to the side, maybe there's a pile of quartz that the miners set aside. You know, that's what they were looking for, and you know, that's certainly worth checking with your detector. Now if you don't find any quartz, that might even be a good sign too, because if they took the quartz with them, that means it had some good value. Gold, yeah. So any thoughts about this trench? You know, it's not necessarily easy to spot these things, but here's one of them.
And do you think so how old do you think this trench is?
You know, it's filled in a lot. I'll bet that this trench was originally maybe a good 3 feet deep, but it's filled in, just sloughed in from rain and that kind of stuff. And so I'm guessing, you know, this is probably a trench from the late 1800s, 1870s maybe, something like that. That's the time frame when they were doing a lot of work up here, especially the hard rock. Now they did some placer work up here too, and we'll take a look at that later. But we're mostly focusing on the hard rock. And this is a spot where they were looking for a vein. And you know, we're going to go down and look at some other spots where they did some working and did some cuts in the ground, and we'll take a look at those and talk about those.
So would these be maybe the piles of dirt that came out of there?
Yeah, these are some of the piles of dirt. I looked and I didn't see any quartz, but it might still be worth going over with a metal detector just to see. But let's go now and take a look at some of those other workings, and we'll talk about them. Did you have a question?
Yeah, if this debris wasn't in here, would you be able to see if there was a quartz vein?
Yeah, no, when they cut these things, you know, if they went across a quartz vein, they would see a whole bunch of quartz in the ground.
Right.
That's what they were looking for. And like I say, this was probably a good 3 feet deep and wide enough for a man to stand in and shovel or pick out of. Well, let's take a look at some of those other workings. Okay, hey, I've got another place that I wanted to show you, and what this is, it doesn't look like much, but this is an old shaft where the miners sunk down, and behind me is the dump of the mine, and this little depression in the middle, that's where the shaft was. And my brother was asking me a minute ago, saying, you wouldn't go down there and stand in the middle of that depression and jump up and down, because it's kind of choked, and it might be safe, but maybe you'll sink down 100 feet. So you don't want to go into these depressions. That's not where you want to go, because it's blocked off. The shaft is caved, but who knows how well it's caved. It might be that it could give way, and you don't want to be down there when it gives way. But the dump behind us, where the miners took the material out and put it there, that's a prime place to detect with your metal detector, because sometimes they took pieces of quartz they couldn't see. Maybe the quartz was muddy or dirty, or maybe it just didn't have any visible gold on it, and they'd throw it on the dump. But your metal detector can see inside the piece of quartz and see if there's any gold in it. And I absolutely, in dumps like this, have gone over it with my metal detector and found some real nice pieces of gold. And I know other people who found really big pieces of gold searching through old mine dumps. So when you see a depression like this, and it's like, well, why is there a depression in the middle of the forest, and then right downhill from the depression is a pile of rock and gravel and stuff? That's a sign that this was a shaft. Now, if you see a working going in, of course, that's an adit, and you can get the same thing. You get a dump on the outside of the adit. I will stay away from the shaft, but we'll check out this dump in a minute and see if there's any gold in it. You guys, what do you think? Think that I'm saying that maybe the working here is maybe 100 feet deep, something like that, based on the pile, because that's a pretty decent sized pile.
Yeah.
Yeah. How would they even start with something like this? With one of those things that we saw earlier?
Yeah, they would have made like a trench here, like that trench we saw, and maybe found a vein in it. And maybe they took some samples and crushed it up and got some decent gold, and then they decided to sink down on the vein and see if they could, get better gold or keep getting the good gold. And they actually would just use like a bucket and windlass, which is a horse thing that you can get. Basically you'll have a pulley, and the horse going around will pull the pulley up, or the horse going the other way will let the pulley down. And so they would dig their hole, really hard work. Now in an area like this, the loose material on the surface, the rock isn't that hard, and they could probably easily go down 50 feet before they started getting into the hard rock and had to do any blasting or anything like that. So it was a lot of work, and they would not do something this big unless they were getting something good.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. They must have found some gold.
This is a pocket, a known pocket area, and they must have been getting some decent gold to do something this big. And you look at how big the depression is. This was only probably a hole that was maybe 6 by 6 or 5 by 5 even, but the sides have sloughed down into, which is why now the depression looks so big. They didn't do a 20-foot diameter hole. The hole in the middle is small, but the sides have run in from rain and whatever else, and over time, like I say, this is probably from like 1860s, 1870s, something like that. Let's take a look at the dump a little bit. So we hunted around a little bit on this dump, and we found some pieces of quartz, nice vein quartz, and we'll test this with the metal detector. But when you find something like this, actually the first thing you want to look for is a pile of quartz. A lot of times the guys, they had little workings like this. They couldn't afford to have a mill and a crusher and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that cost loads of money, and especially they had to haul it in and get it set up. And so they would save their quartz that was good, and they would take it to a custom miller, so that the person that was doing it they would pay them and process it and get the gold out for them. But they would set aside these ore piles. And if you can find one of those ore piles next to an old working like this, those are usually really hot spots, good spots. I've found in some ore piles in Nevada and elsewhere some really nice gold. Sometimes they were setting aside their ore, and they never got around to taking it to a mill, because sometimes it just wasn't worth it. I mean, if they had a few hundred pounds of ore, unless it was super, super rich, it wasn't worth it for them to take it to haul it, because they'd have to get a wagon and load the wagon and haul it to, and so they would have their pile, and just maybe for whatever reason, somebody got sick or something, they never really processed that ore pile. And so keep an eye out for piles of quartz near or in and around these old workings like this, because those are the prime spots to test with your metal detector, because it was the stuff that the old timers thought was really good. And so keep an eye out for that kind of stuff.
So if you wanted to look for it around here, you'd have to have a way to just sort of get all this top stuff off.
Yeah, you could
Because,
kind
I
of,
mean, this has been piling up for years.
yep, you'd kind of rake it if you wanted. But sometimes if there's a pile of just quartz, maybe a few pieces will stick through the pine needles and that kind of stuff. Of course, if you're in Nevada, there's not the pine needles, there's not the junk on top. Whereas here in the Mother Lode country, you get all the trees and all the pine needles and everything else. But yeah, you can rake off some of this stuff, or maybe if you see a couple of pieces of quartz together in a pile, rake it off and see what you get. But that would be good places to look for gold.
So this pile kind of starts over here and goes
Yep.
all the way around to over
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's a pretty big pile.
Yeah, they probably went down 100 feet and maybe went off, on the vein one way or the other, looking for stuff. And because it's a pocket type of system, maybe they got enough gold that they could haul it to a custom mill and have somebody process it. Because there were custom mills back in the 1800s. There were places within 15 or 20 miles of here that they could have hauled their rock to. So
That'd be a lot of work.
it'd be a lot of work. But imagine if you had, in those days, $1,000 worth of gold ore, a couple of guys working like that, you'd pay the person to mill it maybe 20 or 40 bucks, and then you'd have enough that you could live. In those days, $1,000, well, $1,000 would be 50 ounces of gold. The equivalent today would be, at today's price, would be close to $100,000. So imagine if you and a guy were working and you got $100,000.
In a couple months' time.
Yeah, in a couple months' time, you could buy a ranch. You could you could go on a drunk spree that would last a year. and some of those guys, that's what they did.
Right.
But not that I recommend it. But you could certainly celebrate and then have some good money to use for other enterprises. Okay, so this area isn't just a hard rock area. There's actually placer mining and stuff that goes on. In fact, there's quite a bit of placer mining. They actually found a nugget over 60 ounces in the 1930s, and they were placer mining all the way from the late 1800s all the way through. And during the Depression, people did more placer mining. Like I say, they found a over 60 ounce nugget. So it's a pockety hard rock area and a placer area. And here's a sign of old placer workings right here behind us. I was telling you that the old timers, when they needed to have a pipe, cast iron pipe existed, but think how much like a mile or a half a mile even of cast iron pipe would weigh. It would, and they had to haul it all up here with horses and stuff. So they made pipe that would hold pressure and was cheaper to make, and that they could haul out to the middle of nowhere by using sheets of metal. And this, you can't see it on the camera, but this actually is a sheet of steel that they wrapped around into a cylinder and then riveted the sheets together. So they'd make a circle and they'd rivet down where the piece joined, right, to make a circle. They'd rivet that, and then at the end they riveted them together. And I think they used some sort of a asphalt sealant or something like that just to seal it, to make sure it didn't leak. But, you know, after the hydraulic mining ended, you know, nobody was going to go out and collect the hydraulic pipe. So there was hydraulic mining down here, down in the valley where the creek is, and along the creek and that sort of thing. And this is the kind of pipe they used, and they would have high pressure, like a lake or a pond up high, and then the pressure would be through the pipe down to where they were spraying the water and washing away the side of the hill down below us.
So the pipe wouldn't be this size all the way down that hill?
No, they would start with a bigger size and go smaller and smaller and smaller all the way down to where the nozzle was. It might be like 6 inches in diameter, but still at all that pressure, you know, and maybe 100 feet of pressure from where their pond was down to where the nozzle was. That'd be a lot of pressure to wash away dirt.
Move a lot of earth that way.
Yep. And then they would wash it into their sluice boxes, and that's how they would catch the gold.
So when they washed it into the sluice boxes, did they have to use something to guide it in after they washed it down?
Well, usually they would cut like notches, you know, to direct it. So they'd wash the side of the hill, it would wash into a notch, and then notch would lead to the sluice box and then on out.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So pretty cool. That's another indicator that you're in an old mining area with both placer and pockety hard rock gold.
Nice.
Now we did see some quartz too as we were walking. Is that an indicator also?
Yeah. We talked about that, the quartz and how the old time miners would do it, but it just tells you that there's gold here. So I have this thing pointed down a little bit because there's a ditch right here, and that's one of the signs of old timer workings that you want to keep an eye out for. Now this is more placer working because you know, we talked about the water and the water that they use for placer mining. They would cut ditches and take all the water from little streams like this and direct them to some sort of pond, and then they would have high pressure going down. And it's hard to see because I don't have infinite focus that there's a ditch running and it goes way over there and it goes way over there and around over there, and it's clearly at about the same level, and they were using it to divert water to mine some of the placer gold in the creek down below.
Interesting. So they would just sort of get these to get the water to where they needed it.
Yep. They would divert it from every little creek that they could get their hands on, and then divert it to, and sometimes you can follow these ditches. One of the great things about these ditches, and in some places, you can literally follow these ditches and find hidden placer workings.
Oh.
That I know guys that have done that, who've, you know, come across a ditch like this in the forest, and of course you can tell what way is downhill. The water flows downhill, right? And so you can follow the ditch downhill and find maybe hidden placer workings that are in the trees and are hard to see, and maybe nobody's ever worked before, or nobody's ever worked with a metal detector before. And so these type of ditches can be really cool. And then right behind us, I don't know if you can see it, there's another little notch that they cut looking for quartz. Even made a little pile over there. And so, and then the flat spot here, I'm guessing that this flat spot was where they camped. So
even during the winter when there's snow up here, this would help runoff during that time get to fill up the lake or whatever pond that they had.
Right. You know, they wouldn't want to overfill the pond. I mean, there's a point of putting too much water in the pond, but for the most part, they wanted to collect as much as they could. And a lot of these places, like up here in some of these smaller streams, you know, there just wasn't that much water. And so they would, you know, every little drainage or whatever, they would harvest and try to bring it to do their workings.
Interesting.
Yep.
That's still a lot of work for men to dig something like this, because this is man-made. This is not made by.
Yep.
And it does go a ways.
It does. All right, let's take a look at some more workings. So we've been hiking around here and looking at some of the old workings and stuff. I'm not sure that this behind me might be the place where they went in with an adit. And a lot of times, you know, when they went in with those old adits, it doesn't take that many years and the entrance just fills in with mud and dirt coming down on it from above. And I've seen plenty of adits that are, you know, mostly filled and maybe you only have a space like this that's still open. You got to kind of slide in on your belly. I don't like those. And but a lot of them are completely, you know, closed like this might be. But there's also workings around here that looks like it might have been plaster workings. It may have even been from that ditch that we saw above. This may be the placer area at the end of the ditch and would be therefore a good place to use your metal detector. We've certainly have found more quartz in this dirt here than we have elsewhere walking around, although this isn't as fully buried in pine needles as the other areas are.
Mainly because it's washing it out.
It's washing away. Well, and there's not as dense, at least where we're standing,
Yeah.
the number of trees isn't as thick as it is elsewhere in the forest. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that I have another video that I've done on signs of the old-timer hard rock workings that can help you find gold. And I did another video on it, and I'm going to put a link to it right above here. And if you're interested in following and hearing more about this kind of idea and hints that you can use to find gold, be sure to check that video out. Now, the finding of gold and the, you know, being able to do that, it's a skill. I mean, it's something that you learn, just like learning to work with wood or repair equipment or anything like that. Learning to find gold is something that you learn as a skill. And I wrote a book that is meant to help people learn that skill of finding gold. And it's a big, long thing. And I've sold many copies of it. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my book right now. So this is my book, Fistful of Gold. You can see it's an encyclopedia distilling down my 45 plus years of prospecting experience plus my degree into the parts that you need to know. I spent most of 10 years writing this. It was not just a simple effort that, I sat down and wrote it. You can see it's like 250,000 words. It's not something you're going to read through in a day or maybe even a week or more. But it's got a lot of information and reference material that you can come back to. You know, you can read it once and read it again and get more out of it because there's just that much depth of material in this. I wrote this book because I want you to have the skills to go out and find fistfuls of gold for yourself. And if you have the skills and know what you're doing and get out in the field and make a real effort, you can find significant gold. It's not easy. I'm not going to tell you that because, you know, gold, it wouldn't be, you know, close to $2,000 an ounce, which is what it is right now. It wouldn't be so expensive if it was easy to find. It's not easy. You just can't walk out into an old gold field and start picking up nuggets. If the gold was easy to see and find, the old timers would have picked it up and taken it themselves. So you got to have skill. You got to know what you're doing. You got to be able to master what it takes to find gold, and you've got to have the persistence and put in the effort to find the material, to find the gold or diamonds or gemstones that you're looking for. Now, this book has geology, it has facts about gold, it has stuff about diamonds and platinum, but it's mostly about gold deposits, how gold deposits form, how placer and nuggets form, you know, all the questions you've probably wanted to ask. The book is available on Amazon, and I'll put a link to it in the description below, but you can look up on Amazon, Fistful of Gold, and by Chris Ralph, and find this book. Now, the book, if you look on it, it has a very high rating. It has like a 4.7 or 4.8 out of 5, which is really high. I mean, it's hard to please everybody, but I'm close to a 5 out of 5, not far from it, right? So it's been out. I've sold more than 15,000 copies of this book, and I've had tremendous response, tremendous positive response by the people who buy it. And I think if you buy it, you'll be just as happy with it. Now, in addition to my book, I also have a website that I do, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my website and show you some images from the website right now. Now, my website is nevadaoutbackgems.com, and I'll put a link to the prospecting page, this prospecting encyclopedia page, down in the description below, but you can find it at Nevada Outback Gems. I sell some jewelry, turquoise, other gemstones there. I don't always keep the inventory perfectly up to date, so if you're interested in anything you see, do contact me first before trying to send me money or anything, because I want you to be able to get what you order. But the website has lots of different stories, old adventures, even some stories, true stories from the old-time miners of the 1800s. So I think it's something you'll find interesting. The other thing I want to go back to is that all my comments, I want you guys to ask questions on the comments for my videos. I answer 100% of the comments that are made on my videos. Now, sometimes if somebody just says, hey, great video, I really enjoyed it, the comment may just be, well, I'm really glad you liked it. Or if it's a simple question, and sometimes I get people who ask me questions, oh, it would take a book to answer that question, and I recommend that they just buy the book. But I answer all my questions. I try to help people as much as I can. I'm here to help you. So if you're interested in gaining the skills, if you're interested in knowing what you need to know to be successful, follow along with me. Subscribe to my channel, hit the bell so that they'll let you know when I come out with new videos, and I try to do that pretty much every Saturday morning. And you'll enjoy with me, you'll come along with me, we'll have an adventure together, and we will find some nice gold and see what it's really like getting out in the woods, or the deserts, or the mountains, wherever we land, wherever the gold is, wherever the diamonds are, wherever the platinum is. Come along, we'll have some fun. And I'll see you real soon on the next video.